Okay, so this is adding fractions with different denominators. So looking at your sheet, follow along with me, and then I'll kind of explain. I'll use the example on the sheet to help explain and clarify what I'm talking about. So there's really 3 steps when you are adding fractions that have different denominators. So the first step, it says find a common denominator. So the way that you find a common denominator is what we did yesterday and last night for homework. To find a common denominator, you are looking for what? What are you really doing? Natalie?
Finding like the lowest like number, like the lowest common number.
Remember it starts with an M, the lowest common multiple. Exactly. That is how you find the lowest common denominator. So remember in our homework and on the page that we did yesterday, we listed out the multiples like 5, 10, 15, 20, right? So you're not going to do that every time you have to add 2 fractions with different denominators. That you just don't have time for that. So you have to do that step really in your head. You have to be able to go through what the multiples are to choose what the lowest common multiple would be. That's how you get your lowest common denominator. Okay, so let's think about that. What are the multiples of 2? What are the multiples of 2? You can just say them.
2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14.
Okay, so we'll stop there. And what about 5? Multiples of 5?
5, 10, 15, 20.
Okay, so stop. Did anyone catch what would be the lowest common multiple between 2 and 5? Maggie?
10.
10. Okay, so this is your first step. You have found a common denominator. So what you do is, here's your problem. You're going to write an equal sign because that is going to get you to the next step, which is making equivalent fractions using your lowest common denominator. So this is exactly how I'm going to have you set up these problems. So we're looking at this sheet. This sheet. You don't have to do anything. Lowest common denominator is 10. So I'm writing the equal sign because I'm going to be making equivalent fractions. If you look at step 2, it says convert the fractions to equivalent fractions using the common denominator. Does that make sense why I put equal signs and then 10? Because I have to make equivalent fractions now. Okay, so how do we make equivalent fractions? So what do I do? Do you know what would I do?
Multiply the numerator and the denominator by 5.
Right. So 2 times what gives you 10?
5.
So 1 times 5 is 5. And then you would do the same for your bottom. So 5 times what gives you 10?
2.
1 times 2 equals 2. So now you've completed step 2. You've made 2 equivalent fractions with the lowest common denominator. And then step 3, it says add the numerators. So because I have common denominators, I can go ahead and add 5 plus 2 equals
7.
and then my denominator stays the same at 10. So now sometimes you'll get into a situation where, let me just, did that make sense? The first initial look at it? Okay. So sometimes you'll get into a situation, and I'll try to come up with one off the top of my head, although that doesn't always work. Okay, so here's one. So if you were adding 1/2 plus 2 6, you would first do step 1, find the lowest common denominator. So what would be the lowest common denominator between 2 and 6? There's one even smaller.
6.
6. Because 2, 4, 6, and then 6. So this would be step 1, finding the lowest common denominator. Step 2 is making equivalent fractions. What do you notice about making the equivalent fractions? Do I have to make 2 equivalent fractions, Eric?
You only have to make 1 equivalent fraction because 2 6 just is the same.
So 2 6 just